Have you ever caught yourself wondering whether the avoidant person you loved so deeply ever actually thinks about you now that they're gone? Most people assume that once someone like that walks away, they simply move forward without a backward glance. But the reality underneath that assumption is a lot messier and a lot more interesting than most people realize. Today, we're going to explore one of the least understood aspects of avoidant attachment, the hidden emotional world that exists beneath the silence. From the outside, an avoidantly attached person can appear detached, unaffected, or completely moved on. They may stop reaching out, become difficult to read, or seem as though they've placed the relationship neatly behind them. But what happens internally is often far more complex than what anyone else gets to see. We'll look beneath that quiet exterior to understand how they can carry someone in their thoughts long after the conversations have stopped. We'll explore the subtle ways they revisit memories, replay meaningful moments, and quietly hold on to emotional connections they rarely express out loud. While they may not send the text, make the call, or openly admit what they're feeling, that doesn't always mean the person has disappeared from their inner world. We'll also examine why silence can be misleading. For many avoidant individuals, not talking about someone is very different from not thinking about them. Their emotions are often processed privately, internally, and sometimes over a much longer period than people realize. They may compartmentalize their feelings, bury them beneath work, routines, or independence. Yet certain places, songs, anniversaries, or everyday experiences can unexpectedly bring those memories rushing back. We'll uncover the quiet habits that often go unnoticed, the way they mentally revisit old conversations, remember seemingly insignificant details, wonder how someone is doing without reaching out, or find themselves comparing new experiences to a relationship they believed they had already left behind. These internal reflections rarely become visible because expressing them can feel far more vulnerable than experiencing them in private. Most importantly, we'll separate common myths from psychological reality. It's easy to assume that distance always means indifference, or that silence automatically means someone has forgotten you. Human attachment is rarely that simple. While not every avoidant person continues thinking about a former partner in the same way, many experience an internal emotional life that looks very different from the calm, self-contained image they present to the outside world. By the end of this discussion, you'll have a clearer understanding of how an avoidance mind often holds on to meaningful relationships, why those emotions are so rarely expressed directly, and how someone can appear emotionally distant while still carrying memories that quietly remain part of their inner world long after the relationship has changed. Understanding these hidden patterns won't just help explain their behavior, it can also help you stop mistaking silence for the complete absence of feeling. This isn't ordinary remembering, it's a quiet hidden process that usually goes completely unnoticed, one they themselves might never fully own up to, even to themselves. Before we go further, it helps to understand something fundamental. Avoidant people don't experience love the way most people do. They still crave connection, that part never goes away, but only from a safe distance. The moment someone gets too close, whether that closeness is emotional, spiritual, or even just physical, their nervous system tends to sound an alarm. Love and intimacy can register as danger to them, even in moments when they genuinely want closeness more than anything. That's exactly why the person who loved them most fully is so often the one they pushed away, yet somehow keep circling back to in their thoughts. This was never about a lack of caring on their part. It was always about fear of being vulnerable, fear of depending on someone, fear of losing their grip on their own emotions. Avoidant people frequently gravitate toward relationships that feel safe, calm, and easy to predict. Partnerships that never really push against their emotional walls or ask too much of them. From the outside looking in, that kind of relationship might look peaceful, even stable and content, but underneath the surface, they notice the difference, even if they never say it out loud. They think about the one person who genuinely understood them, and those thoughts quietly build inside them as a kind of subtle longing, a reflection they can't quite shake off. In this piece, we're going to look closely at the hidden, subtle ways avoidant people carry someone in their memory, ways that are practically invisible to everyone around them, easy to misread, yet remarkably significant beneath the surface. By the time we're done, you'll have a much clearer picture of how they hold on to someone mentally, why they keep up that outward distance no matter what, and why the person they left behind lingers in their thoughts in a way nobody else quite manages to. It's worth pausing here to really sit with how contradictory this all sounds at first. Someone who pulls away, who goes quiet, who seems to move on without a hint of struggle, is somehow the same person carrying an entire private world of memory and reflection that nobody else gets to witness. That contradiction is exactly the point. Avoidant attachment isn't the absence of feeling. It's feeling that has learned to hide itself so well that even the person experiencing it often can't fully locate it. Growing up, many avoidant people learned early on that expressing need or dependence led to disappointment, dismissal, or even punishment, so they adapted by burying that need somewhere out of reach. That adaptation doesn't disappear just because they've grown up and entered adult relationships. It follows them quietly, steering how they love, how they distance themselves, and how they remember the people who mattered most. Let's start with the small things, because that's often where it begins. Avoidant people can come across as distant, cold, even completely checked out on the surface. They might not text back, they might not call, they might not reach out at all, and that silence can leave you feeling like they've forgotten everything the two of you ever shared. But the truth running underneath that silence is far more subtle and far more real than it appears. One of the quietest ways an avoidant person misses someone is through the small, seemingly unimportant details they can't quite let go of. These are the moments most people would breeze right past without a second thought, but for someone avoidant, these details get quietly stitched into the fabric of their memory. Think about the specific way you used to laugh at something ridiculous, the little phrases or turns of speech you always used, or the gentle way you'd comfort them whenever they felt insecure or overwhelmed by life. They hold on to these memories privately, tucked into the corners of their mind, even if they never bring them up or show any outward sign that they're still there. It was never the big romantic gestures that stuck with them. It's the small, deeply personal things that reminded them of your presence, your attention, and the care you gave so freely. This kind of remembering is almost impossible to see from the outside. You'd never know it just by watching how they act, because avoidant people typically feel deeply uncomfortable expressing emotion in any direct or obvious way. But internally, those tiny fragments resurface in unexpected moments, when they hear a phrase that echoes something you used to say, when they catch a familiar gesture from someone else, or when a quiet memory simply strikes them out of nowhere in the middle of an ordinary day. It's almost as though your presence lingers somewhere in their inner world, even while they appear, on the surface, to have fully moved on with their life. And here's the part that really matters. Remembering these small details isn't just nostalgia drifting through their mind for no reason. It's actually a signal of real emotional impact. It shows that, in some genuine way, you reached a part of them that nobody else has managed to touch. They might push themselves to stay busy, filling their days with distractions and new routines. But underneath all that activity, those small memories are quietly shaping their internal emotional landscape without their full awareness. They miss you in ways they genuinely can't put into words, through recollection, through private reflection, and through an almost subconscious appreciation for who you were in their life while you were in it. So even though they might come across as indifferent or unaffected, these tiny specific memories are actually the very first clue to how deeply they still feel your absence. It's subtle, nearly undetectable from the outside, but it's a real and persistent form of remembering someone. Understanding this helps explain why avoidant people so often linger in thought long after they've already left in action. These small details become the quiet threads that continue tying them to someone they truly cared about, keeping you alive somewhere in their mind even when their behavior seems to suggest the exact opposite. It's a strange kind of loyalty, really, one that never gets spoken out loud or acted on in any obvious way, yet persists all the same in the background of their everyday life. You might imagine that once someone avoidant creates distance, the memory of you fades along with the relationship itself. But memory doesn't actually work that way for most people, and it certainly doesn't work that way for someone whose defenses were built specifically to protect against feeling too much. The very fact that they had to build those defenses in the first place tells you something important, that what they felt with you was significant enough to require protecting against. Nobody constructs elaborate emotional walls around something meaningless. Now let's talk about comparison, because this is one of the clearest, most revealing signs that an avoidant person still misses someone, even if it goes almost entirely unnoticed by everyone around them. On the surface, they might look fully invested in a brand new relationship, calm and completely unbothered by the past. They might end up with someone who seems easygoing, low maintenance, emotionally steady on the surface. But deep down, underneath all of that composure, they're constantly measuring this new person against the one they left behind. This comparing isn't shallow or surface level at all. It's a quiet, internal process that keeps dragging memories of you back to the front of their mind again and again, whether they want it to or not. They recognize, somewhere inside, exactly what you offered them: depth, emotional honesty, and a genuine connection that very few people are actually capable of providing. Those were the qualities that made what you shared truly unique. And internally, they come to realize that nobody else quite reaches that same level of connection. For someone avoidant, this comparison usually stays subconscious. They rarely say it out loud, maybe not even to themselves in so many words, but with every new interaction or relationship they enter into, they're quietly measuring how the other person stacks up against the bar you set without even trying to. They notice which traits in someone new remind them of you, and they notice just as clearly which traits fall short of the comfort, understanding, and emotional closeness you once gave them so naturally. This silent evaluation becomes yet another way their mind keeps circling back to you, a quiet acknowledgement that what the two of you shared was genuinely rare and meaningful, not easily replaced. Interestingly enough, this ongoing comparison often stirs up a subtle sense of restlessness or unease inside them, even when they appear perfectly happy or emotionally distant in their current situation. Somewhere inside they sense that nobody else has managed to reach the emotional depth you once brought into their life. These thoughts tend to surface unexpectedly through a fleeting memory, a small unrelated reminder, or a quiet moment of reflection late at night, revealing a truth they'd rarely admit to out loud. This whole process of measuring others against you functions as a quiet, private form of remembrance. It shows that they genuinely continue to hold on to the significance of what you brought into their world. It isn't just a passing thought that drifts by and disappears. It's become an internal benchmark, one that shapes how they perceive and engage with every new relationship going forward. They carry your presence with them, consciously or not, and they measure new people against the connection the two of you had, usually without anyone else ever noticing. So even if it looks, from the outside, like they've fully moved on, remember that somewhere in their mind, they're still quietly comparing everyone else to you. It's a subtle but genuinely powerful way of showing that they haven't forgotten you at all, and that your impact continues to linger, quietly shaping how they understand love, connection, and emotional honesty going forward. There's an added layer to this comparison process that's worth mentioning too. It isn't only about ranking people against each other in some tidy mental checklist. It's also about a growing awareness, one they may resist for a long time, that the qualities you brought weren't accidental or replaceable. Emotional honesty isn't a trait most people carry effortlessly. Genuine attentiveness isn't common either. So as time passes and they keep encountering people who fall short in one way or another, that awareness deepens rather than fades. It doesn't necessarily push them toward reaching out to you again, since fear usually wins out over that impulse. But it does mean that the standard you set becomes something they can't fully unset, no matter how much distance they put between the two of you. There's also a quieter pattern worth mentioning here, one where avoidant people revisit the emotional impact someone had on them long after the relationship has ended, even while they seem fully absorbed in a new routine or a different life altogether. One of the less obvious ways they miss someone is by mentally circling back to the emotional weight that person carried in their life. This isn't about fantasizing over getting back together, and it isn't regret in the conventional sense either. It's more of an internal, subtle reflection, a private way of processing the intensity of a connection they once had, the honesty of it, and feelings they rarely encounter with anyone else since. In the quiet moments, a thought or a memory can surface completely unannounced, a conversation that shifted how they saw the world, a moment they felt genuinely seen for who they were, or a time your presence steadied them in a way they'd never quite experienced with anyone before or since. These reflections tend to stay private, silent, fleeting almost, but they carry a surprising amount of emotional weight all the same. Avoidant people rarely put this process into words. It unfolds internally, often without any conscious effort or control on their part. What makes this kind of reflection so unique is that it lets them briefly engage with the very part of themselves they usually spend all their energy avoiding, vulnerability itself. While they might struggle enormously to express their emotions out loud, internally they're replaying and reconsidering the authenticity, the empathy, and the understanding you brought into their world. Even while they push other people away or bury themselves in routine and distraction, this quiet inner dialogue keeps gently reminding them of the rare emotional connection they once experienced with you specifically. This kind of revisiting also becomes a way of measuring emotional truth against everything that came after. They notice, whether they admit it or not, just how different your presence felt compared to anyone they've encountered since you. The particular way you listened, the way you responded, the way you simply existed within a space of honesty, leaves behind an imprint they keep mentally returning to, again and again, almost without meaning to. It isn't longing in some dramatic, obvious sense. It's more like an internal calibration of what real connection actually felt like, paired with a quiet acknowledgement that very few experiences since have come close to matching it. In essence, this becomes a private, reflective way of missing someone, one that avoidant people carry silently, without any outward sign or expression. And yet it profoundly shapes how they process relationships, intimacy, and emotional depth going forward. This quiet inner reflection ensures that the person they truly loved stays present somewhere in their inner world, not as some idealized fantasy, and not purely as a point of comparison either, but as a genuine measure of the emotional truth they rarely let themselves feel this openly with anyone else. What's interesting is how this private reflection tends to intensify during quiet, unstructured moments rather than during busy, distracted ones. A long drive alone, a quiet evening with nothing scheduled, the stretch of time right before falling asleep. These are the moments when the mind wanders without permission, and often it wanders straight back to the person who once made honesty feel effortless. Avoidant people tend to keep themselves busy specifically to avoid this kind of stillness, filling their calendars and their attention with tasks, distractions, and obligations. But stillness always finds a way in eventually, and when it does, the memory of real connection tends to surface right along with it, uninvited but unmistakably present. Then there's the way avoidant people test boundaries in tiny, almost imperceptible ways, and this is one of the more subtle, revealing signs that they still miss someone. These aren't grand gestures at all, and they're almost never straightforward declarations of feeling. Instead, they function as quiet little signals, a way of checking the water, gauging a reaction, seeing if some kind of connection still lingers, even when it can't be openly expressed. You might notice this as a random text after weeks or even months of total silence, a casual comment left on a social media post, or a sudden check-in that seems to come out of nowhere. On the surface, it can look completely inconsequential, maybe even accidental. But for someone avoidant, these small interactions actually carry real weight behind them. They're carefully measured attempts to feel some kind of link to you without exposing themselves to the vulnerability or intensity that comes with full emotional engagement. This kind of testing isn't always rooted in love in the traditional romantic sense. Sometimes it's simply curiosity, a quiet urge to revisit a connection that left a mark they can't fully shake off or ignore. It becomes an internal tug of war inside them, wanting to reach out and reconnect, yet fearing the closeness that reconnecting might invite back in. These small boundary tests let them stay loosely tethered to you without taking on the risks that real intimacy demands of them. These gestures tend to be sporadic and unpredictable, and that unpredictability isn't a sign of not caring, it's fear showing up disguised as caution instead. By reaching out in these small, controlled ways, they get to observe just how much of themselves they can safely reveal without feeling overwhelmed. Every brief interaction, every small acknowledgement becomes a little window into the part of them that still genuinely values your presence and the connection the two of you once shared. What matters most here is that these subtle tests reveal the connection never fully disappeared in the first place. Even when they seem distant, emotionally closed off, or fully moved on with their life, the simple fact that they take these small steps at all shows they remain mentally and emotionally engaged with you in a carefully measured way. It becomes their way of processing longing without ever having to confront the vulnerability that scares them so much. In essence, testing boundaries in these small, quiet ways is itself a subtle, almost invisible expression of missing someone. It demonstrates that despite every ounce of avoidance on their part, the person they left behind still occupies real space in their inner world. These small gestures act as signals, quiet markers of an emotional presence that hasn't actually faded, even when their outward behavior suggests the exact opposite. Understanding this subtle form of connection helps make sense of why avoidant people can seem so distant and disconnected, yet still reach back in the smallest and most careful of ways toward the people who genuinely impacted them. It also helps to recognize that these small boundary tests rarely follow any predictable schedule, which can make them especially confusing for the person on the receiving end. One week there might be total silence, and then out of nowhere a message arrives that feels almost intimate in tone, only for the silence to return just as quickly right after. That inconsistency isn't a strategy designed to hurt you. It's usually the direct result of an internal conflict playing out in real time. One moment leaning toward connection, the next retreating back into self-protection. Recognizing that pattern for what it is, rather than trying to predict or control it, is often the first step toward freeing yourself from the confusion it creates. As we've walked through all of this, it becomes clear that avoidant people might seem distant or emotionally checked out, but their mind quietly holds on to the people who truly touch them in some deeper way. These patterns, the small remembered details, the quiet comparisons, the private internal reflections, and the careful boundary testing, all show us that love doesn't always take a visible, obvious form. Sometimes it lives quietly, tucked beneath layers of fear, caution, and self-protection built up over years. The real lesson here isn't to chase after someone who keeps their distance, or to sit around waiting for a recognition that might genuinely never come your way. Instead, the lesson is to understand the deeper nature of human attachment and just how complicated emotional wiring can really be. Avoidant people aren't incapable of feeling things deeply. They simply engage with love in ways that stay private and internal, hidden from view most of the time. Recognizing this can help release you from guilt, self-doubt, or lingering confusion about what actually went wrong between you. It also serves as a good reminder of the real value in your own emotional depth. If you've ever been the person someone else couldn't quite stay fully present with, that doesn't mean your love was somehow lacking or not enough. Quite the opposite, actually. Your ability to connect deeply, to empathize, to genuinely care is a real strength, not a flaw to fix. Some people simply aren't able to meet that kind of depth, and that says everything about their own limitations, not anything about yours. Use this understanding to redirect your focus toward yourself, toward your own growth, and toward the kinds of connections that are actually mutual and genuinely fulfilling. Appreciate that love shows up in many different forms, some expressed loudly and outwardly, others carried quietly beneath the surface, and understand that not every connection is meant to last forever in the exact way we once imagined it would. Ultimately, understanding how avoidant people hold on to someone mentally and emotionally, even from a distance, can give you real perspective, genuine closure, and a lot more clarity moving forward. It allows you to honor your own heart fully while gently releasing your attachment to someone who simply couldn't meet you where you needed them to be. The person who genuinely values you will meet you halfway, without fear holding them back and without constant hesitation getting in the way. So carry this understanding forward with you. Love deeply, always, but never at the cost of your own peace of mind. Recognize your own worth clearly and let your energy flow toward the people who can actually match your emotional openness in return. That, more than anything else, is the truest path toward real fulfillment, both in your relationships and in your life as a whole. And if you take only one thing away from all of this, let it be this. The way someone else struggles to love you doesn't rewrite the truth of what you offered them. Their fear was never a verdict on your worth. It was simply the shape of their own unfinished healing, playing out in a space that happened to include you. You gave something real, and real things leave marks, even on people who never learn how to say so out loud. Let that be enough. Let your own growth continue, regardless of whether they ever find the words to admit what you already know deep down. You don't need their confirmation to trust what you lived through, and you don't need their return to know that what you gave was genuine, whole, and worth every bit of the love you put into it.